The Jamo 807 is my top pick for an apartment speaker if you're willing to do this. No, I'm just kidding. I hate when people do that. If you're willing to do this, I think that these are 100% worth it. If you're not willing to do this, I would just skip the speaker and not worry about it. Okay, so the only position that I like these speakers in is backed up completely against the wall. Completely forward facing, no toe in whatsoever. From an audiophile's perspective, this recommendation is a joke. I'm aware of that, but I swear these things sound the best here and I don't like them anywhere else. Now, the benefit of this is that for people who are limited in space or in a smaller environment, this is actually maybe even a requirement for a speaker that they own. You know, they can't put it 6 feet off the back wall. I wouldn't recommend that you do that anyways with these things because I think that they sound phenomenal actually backed up against the wall. For the price, I think they're an absolute banger. And these are probably my top recommendation for an apartment speaker based off of a number of features. And I'm gonna probably call them the best apartment speaker. That doesn't mean that they're gonna sound the best of any possible speaker in your apartment. It's just gonna be like the best recommendation, I think, like the go-to golden standard type of thing. So it's a combination of the price, the ease of use with amplification, more on that in a second, the looks, which are pretty nice to be honest, and again, that room placement. The price is about $300 is where I picked these up at. I have seen them all the way down to $200 for a pair of floor standers, which is nuts. Now, the ease of use with amplification, I would say you need about 100 watts minimum, but the cleanliness of that power is pretty forgiving. These don't need something crazy high fidelity. You don't have to invest a shitload of money into a really nice amplifier to complement your budget speakers. You could definitely run this off of a cheaper or a vintage used amp, and this is gonna provide a fantastic result. Now, the looks are cool. There is a little bit of a hit in terms of build quality. It's not the best built thing in the world. It's a pretty lightweight cabinet. It doesn't really have a lot of quality feeling or materials behind it, but undeniably it does look good. And if you just sit them and let them be there and you don't mess with them too much, they're gonna stay in pretty good condition for a long time. They're not just gonna fall over or anything like that. And then the room placement. So room placement is an interesting thing, and it's a very intriguing part of the process for speaker owners. When you first get a speaker, you plop them down. A lot of times they sound okay, but they don't sound great. You got to kind of figure out where their sweet spot is in terms of how far away from you, how far away from each other, the back wall, the side walls, how high do you want them, toe in, toe out. There's a whole list of things that you have to go through. This speaker for me is just real simple. Just plop it down on the side of your TV and push it up against the wall and have it fire straight, but not towards you. And I think that off-axis performance against the wall is honestly where these sound best. So these are an 8 ohm speaker and they have a sensitivity level about 90 dB. So they're not the easiest things to drive, but definitely not super hard either. So you do need a little bit of juice. Like I said, about 100 watts or more and you're gonna be fine. But generally speaking, I think that they are pretty forgiving. Now, the sound quality of these is kind of interesting because they have a they're shooting to replicate the top end, I would say, top end of speakers. They have that kind of audiophile, clean, sparkly type of treble response. It doesn't quite work out perfectly for me, and it's a little bit gritting and a little bit harsh and kind of uneven in certain categories. And it can often come across as overemphasized in my opinion, which is why you kind of need that off-axis performance. You don't want it to be hitting you directly. So if these things are pointed at you, you're probably gonna be being laser beamed into your ears, and it just doesn't sound particularly great to me. Now, this is, especially backed up against the wall, a V-shaped speaker. Now, I have talked about this before. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, and I really think it comes down to the quality of the sound within that V-shape. So, not all V-shaped speakers are the same. There are some that are bad, and there are some that are phenomenal. And for the price, this one is very good. So with the bass response, what's interesting about these is that when they're placed up against the wall, they hit low enough to give you really satisfying deep bass, but not so low that your neighbors are gonna be mad at you. And this kind of fits into that apartment living thing that I was talking about before. It's not like having like a dedicated subwoofer, but it's definitely like a lot lower than most bookshelves will go. Even big bookshelves in like the $500 category, they're not really gonna be reaching as low as this guy can. So one question for me is like sub or no sub. And I think because of who I believe will end up purchasing the speaker, which is going to be a person with a specific living situation, and my recommendation is pretty much apartment and or small rooms. I don't know if a sub here is going to be, I don't want to say recommended because a sub is almost always recommended, but I don't think a sub is going to be required here. I think that you're going to be able to get away with the sound quality of this, and you're going to be able to hit low enough in the deep end and clean enough to get a fairly resolving experience down to, I would say, probably about low 40s. I'd be surprised if this touched 30s. So better than most bookshelves will get. There's a little bit of bloat, but you're going to be dealing with some issues at this price range for every speaker. No speaker, in my opinion, at like, $200 to $500 is perfect. They'll have their minor little issues and things that they have room for improvement, this speaker included, but it's still a pretty good experience. Now the mid-range is where this speaker is a little bit interesting. So up against the wall, it's actually okay. It doesn't have these super piercing S's, it doesn't have this super sharp upper mid-range like it does when it's off a wall and when it's kind of more in that typical audiophile position. In that typical position, I find the vocalists to be a little bit too forward in the upper end, better in my opinion in terms of overall performance than the 801s, which are those bookshelves right there, but still not what I would consider to be great for the price range. I think something like some of the ELAC lines or even Mica RB42s are going to be able to outperform this thing for vocal quality several times over. But even in the position, I think the vocalists are clear enough for things like movies and really busy music, but it's not really anything that's going to blow you out of the water with its impressive vocal performance or its rich midtones. It doesn't have anything like that. However, what it does have is Soundstage. It's really good, like really good. The imaging is also good, mostly because the top end is a little bit boosted, so you get these like extra crispy and refined placements to things. So this makes songs like Yoshi Hirakawa's Timbers and basically anything with really good imaging capability quite nice. This is actually better performing in terms of Soundstage, like width and wideness, backed up against the wall than it is in that typical position. For whatever reason, these to me just sound bad in that position, and everything that I would look for a speaker to do in that typical position, these do, but in the atypical placement. So the mid-range comes live, the bass gets enhanced, the placement and delivery of everything has better placement and better delivery in the non-typical backed up against the wall situation. Like all across the board, there's not a single feature of the speaker that I think sounds better out front, except for maybe depth. Perhaps a little bit of depth, but it's like up against the wall, it's like 90-95% the same. So it's really good regardless, but that might be the only feature that I think you are sacrificing by placing them up against the wall. Everything else is just awesome. Now, where this does get slightly complicated for me is what happens if you already own a subwoofer. And that is an interesting question. So I think that what you should do is start with the against the wall placement and just start inching them and kind of moving them a little bit closer to you, but I wouldn't point them towards you. I would avoid the direct on access performance at pretty much all costs. I don't recommend it. I don't think it sounds very good. It's again a little bit too harsh, a little bit too grating for me, and you lose a little bit of that mid-range. It comes across as like an overly sparkly type of sound, and I don't love it. But if you have a sub, I would again keep them pointed straight and just kind of move them a little bit further and further away until you hit some sort of sweet spot. That seemed to be the best method for me. Though if you're considering picking up both these and a subwoofer, I would actually just start with these and see if you're happy with the bass performance, because it might be adequate enough for you. It's actually pretty good. Like I said, not perfect, but fairly good. And that extra 150 to 250 bucks for a good subwoofer may not be needed in your specific living environment. So as far as songs that I really enjoyed on these speakers, I love this song. It's called Mama Saturn by Tannerell. It is a beautiful, kind of smooth, sexy type of song. It is just, it's awesome. It's lush. He's got a beautiful voice. It's quite awesome. Then you have From Paris with Love by Melody Gardot, which is another beautiful, lush, more audiophile track. Lots of highs, lots of lows, really good placement for Soundstage. Then you have Change on the Rise with Avi Kaplan. Pretty much, just a great overall beat, good male vocalist. Then you have Beving for Steven, which is from Jope Beving and a name I unfortunately can't pronounce, but I'll show it on screen here. And this is another beautiful female vocalist. Now I only added 10 songs, it's not a thorough list or anything like that, but there were songs that I just thought sounded really, really good. This speaker plays female vocalists really well. It's a little dry and a little thin on the male vocalist side, but on female vocalists, I feel like it's quite nice. Then you have TikTok from Hans Zimmer. This is where you really get to see the benefits of the Soundstage capability. For a song like this though, you're probably gonna want a nicer amp for it to really shine, because it's a very demanding, like huge, large scale song. And if you don't have really good control over the drivers, it tends to kind of crap out a little bit. Same thing with like Mountains from Hans Zimmer as well. Songs like that are probably gonna sound really good with a nice amp, but if you're just playing movies and most music, you're gonna be fine without a super nice amp. Then there's Can't Help Falling in Love with You by Elvis Presley. Then Marina, Believe in Love. Isla Milo from Billie Eilish. Goodbye from Apparat. And Unchained from Devin Gilfillian. It's quite the last name, Devin. So as far as comparisons go, when I'm asking myself what can I get for like under 500 bucks, what comes to mind is KEF Q50 or KEF Q150s, ELAC UB5s, Mica RB42s are quite good. Then you have the Emotiva line, which I'll be reviewing the T0s soon, but I don't have them here, so I can't compare against those directly yet. This is just a solid recommendation. Like, I can't think of a reason to buy any of those over these in the living environment that we've built for this review. So if you have a more typical setup where things can be backed up a little bit more precisely and you're willing to stretch your budget a little bit for a really good amplifier, I think something like the UB5s beat this, but you're talking about, quite a bit more money for admittedly a better experience, but still, it's more money. So if this is something that's like, this is your budget, it's like 300 bucks, if you can get them on sale, great. I think that this is a super solid recommendation, and anybody who is living in a small room or a medium room, I'd highly recommend these. So that's gonna be my review. Not great for everything, but perfect for some. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Until the next video, my name is Josh, signing off.